Mr. Ronan, he is Associate Dean at Hull Business School in London, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yes, and he will be giving you today about the social media. I hope and I believe it's going to be interesting for most of you. I saw in the chat between students that this is something interesting for them, and that's really good. I hope you will enjoy the next 2 hours with Ronan. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, I believe the best if questions will be in the end, or up to you, Ronan, how you want to do it.
Thank you. What I'll do is we'll see how this goes. Everyone can hear me properly? Can everyone hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
Everyone's saying yes, yes, yes. Excellent.
Perfect. We have
Now,
actually right now 30 students from around 20 countries online. So I hope this will be a good experience for all our students as well. Thank you very
excellent.
much.
Thank you. Okay, can everybody see the screen? It should say now Organizations 2.0, how to successfully implement social technologies in business education. Is everyone seeing that? Right. So what I'm going to have to do is when I show my screens to show the slides properly, I won't be able to see the chat. But I've got a little pop-out window. Wonders of new technology. Excellent. So welcome. Thank you for all coming to this session. I hope it's going to be informative, interesting. I will try occasionally I will try and ask you some questions, but we'll see how it goes. Sometimes from my experience, using asking questions during virtual sessions isn't very easy because there's such a time lag between people being able to ask. If you put a question in the chat, I will try to see it. I have the chat view in front of me. If I don't, my apologies, but then hopefully we can catch up afterwards, so do make a note of them. So before I talk about social technologies in general, what I want to do is actually talk about where it all came from. I want to talk a bit about innovation, because social technologies is something that a lot of people they get confused about, or they automatically say this is not for me, this is for kids, it's all about Facebook and I'm a serious business. And what I'm hoping to show you is that this is something that all of us should be thinking very carefully about. So now there we are. Lovely. So of course, if we can go back to the internet. The internet, as you all know, I hope you all know, started way back, was started by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who was working at the CERN Foundation in Switzerland, and he developed it out of an existing private network, which was only between the military and also between universities, and this was back in 1990. Now, I won't ask for a show of hands here because that's rather confusing, but you will all remember when you first got online. If you think about it, you'll remember some people, when I talk to some students, master students of mine, MBA, EMBA students, and depending on which country they come from, it is often only after the year 2000 that some of them got online. I remember distinctly that I got online in 1994. It was, even though the internet, the World Wide Web, I should say, was started in 1990. It only really became a public platform in 1992. That's when people started to do commercial pages. And I remember going in, I think it was 94, 95, in an internet cafe where I was living at the time in Barcelona. I was with my partner, a couple of friends. We went online. We didn't know what to do. And we found a chat room. And we discovered there's only one person in that chat room who was 14 years old, and we had nothing to talk about with a 14-year-old, so we quickly left the chat room. And for me, I could see the potential, but the internet wasn't yet ready. The World Wide Web was not yet ready for users in Barcelona, for users in Spain, and even in Europe to really embrace fully. There are many, many organizations that did not have websites in 95, 96, 97, and it still surprises me when I look for small and medium enterprises to see that they don't have a full website. And yet, if you look at the product life cycle and you think about the internet as a whole, you can start thinking about, well, where is the internet at this moment? Where is Um, the internet. Now, I believe that we are currently, if we're talking about the West, we are in the late maturity stage. Most people who want the internet in the West are able to access it. There are a few places in Britain where I'm speaking from. There are a few places in rural areas that do not have a good internet connection, but certainly most cities in Western Europe do, in the United States. And there is now such a big growth in mobile technology, 4G, etc., that if you want to get online, you are able to. But of course, in some emerging markets, some of you might actually be in emerging markets, that might be very different. You might still find that most people do not have internet in the home. They have to go to internet cafes, or they go to their office or their university to access the internet. So the product life cycle is going to be very, very different depending on the market, as it shows here in the bottom left-hand corner. We could think about this is, after all, a business education. So you could think about the product life cycle in terms of MBA programs. The MBA was started about 100 years ago by Harvard Business School, and it is probably, I would say, it's in the late maturity. It's even in the decline. It's over here. It's now so prevalent throughout the market that there is, I believe, 7,000. There are 7,000 business schools available, and the offer available to prospective students is enormous. Their decision-making process is a very complicated one, and that's why now you will find that different universities, different business schools are trying to find different ways to differentiate themselves and to make things different, to make their MBA slightly different. It might be through practical integration. It might be through being able to study virtually, through the use of MOOCs, etc. You can think about this about everything else. Virtual worlds, I will talk about later. Now, with virtual worlds, where are we? I would say virtual worlds is down here in the bottom left-hand corner. It's pre-growth, it's introduction. It really hasn't seen the growth, but we'll talk about that towards the end of this session. Now, if you look at the next slide, there's diffusion of innovations. This curve, devised by Everett Rogers, explains how innovations of any type are diffused within a community. Now, that innovation, it can be something like birth control, the usage of condoms or oral birth control or other systems. It could be which is one of the studies that fed through to this. It could be the introduction of innovations such as the iPad, the mobile phone, or webinar technology such as we are using now. Now, as you can see there, there's about 2.5%. But if you can see, those of you who know your statistics will, of course, know that these are standard deviations. And it's only that one standard deviation right in the bottom left hand where the innovators, this is when they start to really get to grips with the new technology. I would not include myself as an innovator in any technology. I'm not at the cutting edge, no matter how much I wish I were. I hope I'm an early adopter in many areas. That might not be the case, though, to be frank. I am, rather than an early adopter, I'm probably an early knower. I can't afford to have the technology that I would like to when it comes out. I've only just recently been given a laptop by my business school, which works properly, which is more than I would have personally spent. But early adopters are the people, they're often the press, and these are people often in cities, in tech hubs. These are people in Silicon Valley. These are people in London who are around what we call the Silicon Roundabout. These are what we call mavens. They're the champions. They're the people who really love new technologies, new innovations. It doesn't have to be technology, and embrace it. And it's only when those early adopters build to such an extent that we get that critical mass that it's going to move over to the early majority and the late majority. And that's when it becomes, the innovation is truly embedded in the society. As we'll see in a couple of slides, there's actually a gap here that Geoffrey Moore discovered called the chasm. And there's a chasm between the early adopters and the early majority. And some things are just that little bit too technical, too complicated for people to make the jump from the geeks, the early adopters, the technophiles, through to the early majority. We'll have a look in a moment. But first of all, where do we think the social networks might be on this? So if social networks such as Facebook and LinkedIn are a innovation, where would they be? Now, if you consider the market to be the world, we've got 7 billion people on the planet. You have 1.4 billion regular users on Facebook. So it's definitely somewhere here in the majority, but exactly where is difficult to say. You could argue it's already late majority. Its growth has slowed enormously, and most people in most countries in the world who want to be on Facebook are on Facebook. So whilst Facebook looks unbeatable, one must remember that MySpace back in 2005 was the social network that was enormous in the air. And I've got a technical problem coming up. Okay, can you quickly post a yes if you can see the screen still? Okay, Ralph Hilbert says you can only see. So is everybody looking? Thank you, everybody. And you can see the diffusion of innovation slide, Ralph, because you're saying only the internet slide. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. That's great. So the social networks, if you think about things like Facebook, I think they're in late majority. They're on the decline. A new network will come along, which is going to be better. Remember, a lot of teenagers aren't on Facebook because that's where their parents are. So if you consider what young people are getting into, how they're going to spend their time when they get into full-time education, higher education, and into the job market, they're not necessarily going to be within in Facebook. There will be something else. I suspect I know what it will involve, but I can't be sure, of course. Now, back in 1943, apparently Thomas Watson, who is supposed to, who was, I believe, the chief executive of IBM at the time, said, I think there is a world market for about 5 computers. This was during the Second World War, towards the end of the Second World War, when the computer industry was very, very, very young. Things were being developing. But if it is true, then obviously it shows quite an impressive lack of foresight on his part. And yet he was, by any stretch of the imagination, an expert. He was right at the head of IBM, the largest computing company in the world. Then a professor from Cambridge in 1951, Douglas Hartree, is supposed to have said, all the calculations that would ever be needed could be done on 3 digital computers in Cambridge, Teddington, and Manchester, which, for those of you outside the United Kingdom, are 3 cities within the UK, Cambridge, of course, being where the university is. Now, Watson and Hartree, despite their success and genius, and if they did say these things, clearly thought of progress and innovation as something that has already happened. And time again, I see this with my clients, with my students. And I like to go and tell them, well, what you haven't considered is Gartner's hype cycle. Some of you will know Gartner, the research company, and about 7 years ago now, 6 years ago, they came up with what they call the Gartner's hype cycle. This, shows the rise and fall and then rise again along that curve over time of the expectations that people have of a particular technology. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, it starts with research and development. You then have startup companies, first rounds of venture capital funding, first generations of products. It is rising. The expectations of this new technology is rising. Then you have early adopters investigating, and mass media hype begins. That's when the journalists, all the technology programs on TV and radio start talking about it, and the press, Wired magazine, will undoubtedly have an article about it. You then have supply proliferation. More people get in on it because they see, hang on, this is really interesting. And there's what they call the peak of inflated expectations. This is when everyone is thinking that this is the most amazing thing ever. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And it's going to solve the world's problems. Everything is going to be solved with this new technology. That's when activity beyond early adopters starts. It might start moving into early majority. But that's when the negative press begins. Partly this is because that's what the press do. They have to build something up, and then they have to knock it down, because that's how they sell magazines. Can I please close the camera and talk by microphone if I can? Yes, I shall try and do that. So I quite agree with you, by the way. I can't imagine why anyone would want to see me. So let me load. Okay, that should be better. Perfect. I find much better. Yes. Well done for saying that. Who was it? Khalil. Thank you. Uh, Adriana, it's better if you see me. Maybe I should send a photograph through. But it's true, Dr. H has said there is some people have a slow internet and the video is going to take up that bandwidth. So just imagine there's a bearded middle-aged man talking to you. Picture that whilst you listen to the voice and just try and look at the slides. When I'm doing this in a live situation, I tend not to stand at the front. I'm walking around the room. So you wouldn't be able to see me most of the time anyway. I find it difficult to sit in front of the computer as it is. So as we got Gartner's hype cycle. You then have the negative press. The negative press begins. Too little the font of this one. Yes, the font to Adriana, by the way. I'm reading out some of the information here, but you don't have to read all of it. And this is a problem. The internet connection through webinars means that small fonts will not be able to be read. But the idea is not that you read all these things. Do make some notes, though, while I'm speaking, which is always the best way to make sure that you get the learning. So after this peak of inflated expectations, you have the negative press. They have found maybe there's something new coming along and they say, oh, that innovation isn't very good, it's not worth it. They will knock it down for a variety of reasons. It might be that they have realized that it's not the best thing since sliced bread, but it is an interesting innovation. But unfortunately, they tend not to be balanced. Wired magazine, I would argue, is, and there are a few other specialist magazines that are rather balanced, but a lot of the mainstream press are not in that market, I'm afraid. And they're there just to make people talk about things for good or bad. So then you have a supply consolidation, failures, people start getting together. They might start losing their funding. So you have second, third rounds of venture capital funding for the successful ones, the ones who are able to prove they have a business model. And then you have right at the bottom of this curve here, in the third column, it is the trough of disillusionment. Wonderful names that Gartner came up with. The trough of disillusionment is where projects have been considered to have to have no future use. Now, sometimes they will stay here for a week or 2 weeks. There might be a month, a year, 5 years, or even 10 years. Now, if a colleague who I met at the conference I spoke to recently said that if you take out this big curve at the beginning, the peak of inflated expectations, it's almost a natural progression, a geometric progression of a curve right through from the R&D through to 5% of potential audience has adopted fully. And that's true. But it is important to recognize why this curve happens and to recognize more when it happens. Because at this curve, people start thinking that it's an amazing piece of technology. It's going to change their lives, their businesses. Everyone's going to become incredibly rich. And then, of course, the reality sets in. And it might be a great piece of technology, but it's not going to be perfect. So a lot of people then abandon it rather than think, okay, we need to consider how this technology should be used. When something has started to move out of the technology, the trough of disillusionment, it says less than 5% of the potential audience has adopted fully. Then we have second generation products, some services. So people have started to say, okay, there is a market for this and we're making enough money just to keep funding and the business model is working and our venture capital funders are happy. And it starts to climb in the fourth column, the slope of the slope of enlightenment. The methodologies and best practices start to develop. You have third generation products out of the box, product suites when they start combining them with other functionalities. And it's only in that fifth column that it says it's entering the plateau of productivity. This is when you get high growth adoption, 20 to 30% of the potential audience has adopted the innovation. And that's really when you get into the early majority or into the middle of the majorities of adoption. But this process is a difficult one. And a lot of technologies die in the process. It's not because they're bad technologies. And it's not because they don't actually have a potentially good business model. But sometimes they might be superseded by a new technology. Sometimes it is simply that the funders say that they don't want to give any more money, and it dies. Now, one thing to consider here, for example, which we'll talk about a little later on, is Twitter. Twitter is a technology which is quite nice, quite simple. Text messages that are used for microblogging. We'll talk about those soon. But it's not a business model that works. They've been around now since 2006. It was invented 2006, public launch, and I think it was 2007. 8 years now, and they're still not making any money. They still haven't found out how to cover their costs of their server farms, of the bandwidth, etc. And if they did not have very, very considerate funders, they would have failed long ago. But for some reason, they've been allowed to survive. I would say they are an anomaly rather than typical of how these things work. Excuse me. Now, that was the theory. Now let's look at the practice. So if we look at 2008, you have the Gartner's hype cycle. And you can see the on the bottom, it says if it's a empty white circle, it's less than 2 years to mainstream adoption. A light blue, 2 to 5 years. Dark blue, 5 to 10 years. A yellow triangle, more than 10 years. And a red circle with a cross through it is obsolete before the plateau. So it was a nice technology, but something better has come along that meets those needs better before it has managed to achieve the plateau of productivity. So in the left-hand corner, we have things like behavioral economics. That was actually an innovation once. People considering, oh, how are people thinking about how and why people spend the way they do. Mobile robots, augmented reality. More than 10 years already in 2008. Oops, I went forward one. 3D printing. I want you to look at 3D printing here. That's already been around in 2008. That had already been around as a technology for 5 to 10 years, and it still was not very well known. It was still rising up those expectations. Microblogging, or Twitter as we know it generally, but there are other platforms available, was still very unknown in 2008. And it was absolutely only in the very early adopters that had it. I had my first Twitter account in 2007, but it was one of those things that nobody I knew was on Twitter, and it was only the big people in the industry. Then if you look down here, social computing platforms, video telepresence, solid state drives. Okay, this computer that I'm operating now is run with a solid state drives. I don't have a hard drive in it. And now we have public virtual worlds. I'm going to talk a lot about public virtual worlds later on, and Web 2.0, which is very much what this is about. I don't call it just Web 2.0, I talk about social technologies in general. And within Web 2.0, I include public virtual worlds. I include wikis that you have down there. I include corporate blocking, and a few other services which have gone off it. So as you can see, people are thinking that Web 2.0 is useless. There's no point in considering it. It's a waste of time. Public virtual worlds, they've been around 2 to 5 years already. This is 2008. In 2005, I have slides, which I'm not going to show now, but from some amazing uses of virtual worlds back in 2005, 2004. They've been around a long time. People have been experimenting with them. And then we go down, wikis are there. People are starting to see that, wikis, there might be a use for wikis. Maybe we could, I don't know, maybe we could have an encyclopedia built on a wiki. Maybe we could start using them. I'm going to talk about all these things later on. But please remember where that 3D printing is and virtual worlds. So if we look at 2009, we've got 3D printings in the same position, augmented reality. These I'm going to group together. Ebook readers like the Kindle, people are there's a lot of hype out about how they would work. And then public virtual worlds right at the bottom. But Web 2.0 is already sliding up there. People are saying, actually, okay, there is a use for this. There is a purpose in my business for this. 2010, 3D printing. It's still here on the left. It's still on the rise of expectations. We have cloud computing. We've got all kinds of other technologies here. Microblogging is sliding down. People are saying that Twitter is just a waste of time. Public virtual worlds, it's right at the bottom. It's been around 5 to 10 years. Virtual assistants, all these other things. Broadband over power lines. This was going to be the great way to get high-speed broadband to everybody. And then, of course, it became superseded by better ADSL networks, 4G for mobile, fiber optic, etc. And so that idea, it was a nice idea, but it was obsolete because of new technologies that came along. 2011, 3D printing, same position. We have gamification, a very important way to try and incentivize. Augmented reality is there. Virtual worlds are down here at the bottom still. Ebook readers, people are saying, oh yeah, no, actually it's really good if I can have my whole library in a Kindle or other brand. 2012, 3D printing, people are starting to talk about it. I've been talking about it since 2006 when I started doing conferences and started teaching. I've started talking about virtual worlds, 3D printing, and so on. And it's only then that 2-3 years ago it started to get into the mainstream press. I'll give you a couple of examples in a moment. Virtual worlds, still right at the bottom. Hosted virtual desktops, etc. But you'll have seen that Web 2.0, wikis, social networks, all those things have gone out. People now accept that they are productive platforms. And yet, every time I speak to businesses, every time I speak to people, they are often concerned at how all this technology is not for them. It's not for their business. And I disagree entirely. I think this is for every business. Every business can get something from social technologies. Gartner's hype cycle in 2013, with wearable user interfaces, the Internet of Things, 3D printing suddenly splits into enterprise 3D printing and consumer 3D printing. Virtual reality is still at the bottom. Augmented reality is going down into the trough of disillusionment. So why do I talk about 3D printing as a social technology? Well, because any small organization or individual is now able to manufacture objects. There will come a time, not in the distant future, when we will all have 3D printers, I believe, at home in the way we now have paper printers. And it's not going to happen immediately. It will happen, I believe, one day. We'll be able to download the plans and start creating our own products with the schematics of how to put things together. And we'll be able to do amazing things. By the way, Ralph, Gartner's hype cycle, there were about 7 slides on the same one, but they had different texts. Just to answer your text. So now we've got a slide here that says 3D printer builds new jawbone for transplant. This was in 2012 when a jawbone that was destroyed was scanned. I think it was damaged by cancer. It had been scanned and a replica had been made to the exact measurements of the recipient and was able to be transplanted. This was 3 years ago now. And it's not just for people. This tortoise. Last week, I found 3 stories about 3D printing in the BBC News within 2 days. So this sea turtle had a 3D printed jaw. The turtle had its jaw injured by a boat's propeller. The beak, made of medical grade titanium, replaces the loggerhead turtle's jaws, half of which was sheared off in the accident. This little boy, Milligan Lowe, 7, from Thurmaston in Leicestershire, was born with amniotic band syndrome that prevented fingers on his left hand from developing, and he had a 3D printed hand made specifically for him with full-length fingers. And of course, as you can see, it's in blue, yellow, and red. He's a small boy, and he likes things that remind him of Lego. And L'Oreal have decided to start 3D printing skin. So they announced they will try and start 3D printing skin so that they can test products. So 3D printing is finally seeing some important commercial uses. And I don't think it will be long before we start to think of the uses that we would have in the home. One day, for example, I'm talking about Lego. Lego are undoubtedly they have revolutionized their business model. They have the films now. They have merchandise tie-ins with different with Batman and Spider-Man and Star Wars, all kinds of things like that. They have their theme parks, because with 3D printing, it's going to be very easy for people to make their own Lego bricks one day. So Lego can't rely simply on manufacturing little pieces of plastic. They have found different ways to make money, which helps the brand. So if we go back now to the last year's 2014, the Gartner's hype cycle, we can see at the top of inflated expectations we have the Internet of Things, which I also consider a social technology. I consider it a social technology because, again, it involves everything. It involves everyone, everything having a chip within it, which allows it to communicate with the other things. Gamification is sliding down into the trough of disillusionment. Augmented reality is there. Virtual reality is still there. It's shocking. And yet 3D printing, enterprise 3D printing, has already started to go up the plateau of the slope of enlightenment. 3D scanners are now there. You can go to Selfridges in the center of London and have yourself scanned, and they will make a small 3D version of you. So there is a huge time lag between a new technology coming out, it being talked about in the press, and it actually becoming productive. It doesn't mean that it won't become productive one day. So I believe all serious people in business, in organizations, should always think about this. Every time they read about new technology, think about how it might affect their business in the coming 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Oculus Rift. One of the reasons I believe virtual reality, which is still down there in the trough of disillusionment, one of the reasons I believe that it has not taken off is because it has a very difficult interface. The interface is fundamentally, it is still a keyboard on your computer and you're looking at a screen. So you're trying to imagine a 3D world, a 3D virtual environment, graphic environment, but you're looking at it through the 2D medium of your screen. And what Oculus Rift have managed to do is create very economic headsets, three-dimensional headsets. You put those on and you believe you can move around within this 3D world. The woman in this picture is holding out her hand. You already have gloves that you are able to use to show where you are working, but also the technology that is used by Microsoft's Kinect gaming system, and there are plenty of others, means that they can the movements of the individual can be tracked as well by a computer and then mimicked within the virtual world. So once the interface becomes easier, people will be able to use it easier. Now we can simply see this is a slide I found, which 2012, which I actually quite like. I thought I'd quickly share it with you because it maps the Gartner's hype cycle onto the diffusion of innovations curve, and this one actually is Geoffrey Moore's one showing the chasm between the early adopters and where sometimes you will find that a technology is unable to continue up that slope, doesn't reach critical mass, doesn't reach early majority, and that is because of the trough of disillusionment. If everyone thinks something is a bad idea and there are no celebrity backers, then unfortunately some very good ideas will simply fail. In the same way, some mediocre ideas will succeed because they have those celebrity backers. They have the right type of support. Moore's Law. Many of you will know Moore's Law. Moore worked in Intel in the 1960s, and he came up with the law that the computing power will double every 18 months while costs halve. This has actually turned out to be more or less true. If you look here in the 60s, the speed on the y-axis and on the x-axis, we have the exponential scale of we have the years in the decades. And approximately the speed of processing has actually followed this law. And that is why my mobile phone is more powerful than the computer I had in the 90s. That computer was more powerful than the one that I had in the early 80s. And that one was probably even more powerful than the one that managed to launch NASA's mission to Mars in the 1969. So another one to look at is Ray Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns. Now, one moment, please, while I just have a quick drink. So Ray Kurzweil is a futurist. Now, he predicts that the computing power, because it is advancing so quickly, it will exceed the combined power of all human brains on the planet at a particular point. That point he predicts is 2045. It doesn't really matter what that year is, but there will come a point. I think one has to be logical about this. There will come a point that computer power will exceed all human brains at some point in the future, and at that point, of course, the future will be very difficult. When computers are able to create new computers yet that are more intelligent than they are, the future is completely unpredictable. How fast will they develop new computers that will develop new computers, each one in scale of power more faster with more cognitive processing than before. So the point at this point, the computers will be able to do all kinds of things. They'll accelerate exponentially, and the future, as I say, will be impossible to predict. He says 2045 here, by the way. I will be 77, and I hope I live to see that point where computers exceed human intelligence, where we truly reach that mythical science fiction moment when computers will be able to do everything for us. They'll be able to predict what we want before we actually want it. They'll be able to plan. They'll be able to help us. The millennials, new generation. My son is 4 years old. He's going to have an amazing life ahead of him in terms of the innovation that will happen. Another thing that Ray Kurzweil says is that if you look at the rate of innovation that we've had in the 100 years of the 20th century, from 1900 to 2000, and you can see by this exponential curve, this is a good example of what we're referring to. If you consider how we went from very early motor cars, steam engines, the birth of powered flight, etc., mechanical computing, cash registers, going through to other types of computer system, the development of the transistor, the cars, rockets, space exploration, etc. If you consider all these things, so everything that happened in the 20th century over those 100 years, if you consider 100 years of progress by that measure, he predicts we will have 20,000 years of progress in the 21st century. 20,000 years compared to then. Try and think how your grandparents will have seen the world change from the early 20th century, great-grandparents, from the early 20th century through to the change of the millennium. There have been incredible progress. Now, think how that will continue to change over this. Things are speeding up. It's getting faster and faster and faster. For hundreds of years, there was no technological progress at all. Hundreds of years, we didn't do anything. People wrote a little. They wrote a little more. We had monks in monasteries writing, and then there was the invention of the movable type printing press by Gutenberg. That developed more information. It meant that education could occur in a better way. But then it was the development of the steam engine that was able to drive the Industrial Revolution. And there are a few triggers along the way which have driven this incredible progress. And a lot of these triggers are happening more and more now. The ability to create a new type of computer that can go faster, that can fit within our wristwatch, a computer that could be a chip that could be embedded in our head. So we don't actually need to have an interface. We can simply access everything, access the entire internet in through our brains. All of these things I think will come. I'm not sure when, but they will come. So the question is not what good is it to me, but how can I use this in my business? How can I use this to improve my business? How can I be prepared so that this doesn't make sure that my business goes goes bankrupt? Now, if you're still a bit skeptical, some of you might be, if you're still a bit skeptical about the growth of technology, let me ask you, please, when was the first mobile phone? So if you just type in the year that you got your first mobile phone, if you type into the chat screen, please. There's no one there? Aha, thank you, Ralph. I was a bit concerned. I was on my own. 2001, 1999, Elvira. 2002, Elen, Mohammed, 97. Christina, 97. Uwe, very impressive, 84. Very impressive. And Lu Xu, really, 1980? That's very impressive. I'm very impressed. Thank you. Okay, guys. So Sarah Wheeler, 91. So for some people, Lu Xu and Sarah and a couple of the others, you'll remember this kind of mobile phone. You probably had a little briefcase to carry with it as a battery. And you had maybe half an hour of talk time. It was not an easy time. I had my first mobile phone in 1995 in Barcelona, and it looked pretty much like this one on the left. Very, very poor reception, very low battery life, very simple. You couldn't even do text messages. That hadn't been done. And then in 2006, 2007, we had Apple's iPhone, which of course was perhaps the big growth of the smartphones. But the first commercial mobile phone network was in Tokyo 1979. That's why, let me just scroll back through this chat. Somebody, Uwe, 1984. And there was somebody who said 1980. Where was it? There we are, Lu Su Nam. So very impressive, Lu Su, if that's right. So the first commercial mobile phone network was in Tokyo in 1979. The Motorola Dynatac 8000X here on the left-hand side was from 1984. And then we have phones from the 90s and the iPhone 4. Of course, that's grown and grown and grown and grown. So, quick calculation, 10, 20, 36 years since the first commercial mobile phone network. And it's only the last decade that it's seen such growth. And of course, in some countries, it saw more growth. So emerging markets have embraced mobile phones far faster than places like the USA that everyone had a landline in their room, and they didn't embrace mobile phones as quickly as we did in Europe, and certainly in the emerging markets did, where they didn't have a good connection of landlines. So let me ask people, please, when was the first smartphone? I'll give you the answer because I just realized I gave it to you there too quickly. First smartphone was not the BlackBerry, it was the IBM Simon in 1994. It looked like that. Now, by smartphone, I mean it had a menu system. You were able to send emails, track contacts, schedule appointments, receive faxes, make phone calls, all via the cellular network. It was priced at approximately $1,500 in today's money. So it was too high for most consumers, and it didn't last long on the market. So now, please, in the chat screen, can you type in the year that you believe we discovered the first touchscreen device? The first touchscreen device, when was that, please? $2000 from Sarah. Very good. UA 2006, 2005, 2003. Alec 1990. Okay, Alec has been paying attention because this smartphone had a touchscreen that you can see on the screen now. So that was 1994. I didn't say that you didn't have to use a stylus, but it was a touch screen. So there's only the only difference between the touch screens that we have now and the touch screens of the IBM Simon is that you don't need a stylus, that it has haptic touch, that it can tell where your finger is. Okay, so a lot of you are thinking in the last 15 years, which is quite interesting. I think you're going to be happy to see that the first touchscreen device was in fact in 1964. It was the Rand tablet. Rand Computer Company designed the 10 by 10 inch tablet. There was no keyboard. Computer users could choose menu options, draw diagrams, write software using only a digital stylus. It cost about $18,000. That's $130,000 today. So its use was very limited, but the technology existed. The technology exists over 50 years ago. And it took a long time for different people to find out a use. So the first tablet computer, many of you already will have had one, was in approximately 1999 from Microsoft when they had a commercial tablet computer and used it with a stylus. And it wasn't until 2010 that Apple produced the iPad that it created a whole new market segment. But the technology, the concepts have existed long before then. Just people hadn't yet worked out how to make it work, how to create the functionality and the user experience that would provide a viable commercial product. Now, I like this one. I used to work with music. That's how I first got into technology. So first digital audio player. Now, please, into the chat section. When did you get your first digital audio player? No idea, Sarah. Okay. A lot of people remember when they first got their iPod. 2001, Dagrid, very good. iPod came out, I think, 2001. I actually had an MP3 player before 2001 from the Arcos brand, which is a French brand. One thing that one must remember is the Apple don't always create new technology. What they do is they take existing technology and they make it work nicer and they make it look better. But the technology has already existed. So you're going to be pleasantly surprised again that here we have the drawings, the idea, the concept, the technology of the and a business plan for digital audio downloads and portable players back in 1979. This is by Kane Kramer. He patented everything. He predicted that you would use this small digital audio player to go down the high street, go into your record store, and to plug the player into a computer and download the music, the digital audio music, onto your player. He had everything. What he didn't predict was the internet, and that we would download music over Wi-Fi. Steve Jobs finally admitted in 2006 that he recognized the importance of Kane Kramer's work and paid some compensation for using so many of the patents and the technology that went into the iPod. But 1979, again, 36 years ago, that digital audio players were first considered and the technology was there. But unfortunately, it wasn't able to get past that chasm of early adopters or even early adopters past innovation. So a lovely quote here from Niels Bohr, the Danish physicist. Prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. So I like to give this preamble to everything because for me it is so fundamental. Every time new technology comes along, I speak to colleagues, I speak to students, to participants on executive education, I speak to friends, and they say, oh, not for me, I'm just not interested in that. And I have to remind them that, okay, but think about when you were young, what technology did you have? What technology have you adopted since then, and you haven't thought about it? And then we reach a certain age and we start to forget. So let's look at what is social media. So social media, first of all, let's look at old media. What kind of technology was old media? I will, well, I'll give you the answer because of the nature of this session. With old media, we're talking about a very, very one-way communication. This was from one to many. One large organization, the BBC, Times newspaper, Figaro newspaper, CNN, whoever it might be, broadcasting their information to the masses, one to millions. And this was the way it was for centuries and centuries and centuries. Back in the old days, you would have the edicts from the emperor or the king or queen or whoever it might be. There would be a town crier who would come and give the news to the villagers. Printing was still in the hands of the industrialists, a very small number of organizations. And then in 1990 or 1992, as we discussed, the World Wide Web came along, new media or internet, and yet it was still very much the same kind of technology. This is from one to many. We had large organizations like Yahoo or like the BBC doing broadcasting to millions and millions of people. There was virtually no interaction. And this is still how we usually interact with our students and with our prospective students. This is still how we all interact with our customers. So I try to engage you in this conversation. It's actually quite difficult because the technology hasn't really got there that we can have a really good conversation in the same way we can in the classroom. But it does mean that I'm able to speak to tens or hundreds or potentially thousands of people globally, and they are able to attend because they don't have to find the money to travel to a different classroom. But it's still obviously very difficult. And this is one-to-many communication. Then suddenly social media came along. This infographic shows Twitter users who mentioned social CRM on April 6, 2010, scaled by number of followers. As you can see, we have on the outside, we have a few people who don't have many followers. There's 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, one person. This one has quite a few. And then in the middle, these are people who are connected. They have hundreds or thousands of followers, and they follow hundreds or thousands of people. And there's a big mess. And what this is it shows that we have a different type of communication now. Social media, or Web 2.0, as it is also known, is all about many-to-many communication. The first time, really, in the history of our species that we have this many-to-many communication. We don't have a hierarchy. We are able to all broadcast, all communicate at the same time. So we then have where did this term Web 2.0 come from? We put 2.0 at the end of things. I do it frequently just to indicate that I'm talking about a new generation. And that was the intention that Tim O'Reilly had when he came up with the term. Tim O'Reilly of O'Reilly Media back in 2003. He is a technology publisher, and he came up with the term and started his Web 2.0 conference in 2004. So this is now 11 years old. This is nothing new. This was something that people were already talking about then. But if you remember Gartner, this was still in the rise, and it hadn't yet reached the height of inflated expectations from the Gartner hype cycle. If you want to look what O'Reilly talks about and how he describes Web 2.0, you can go to his website. He blogged about it in 2005, and he talks about these things. He says it's services, not packaged software, control over unique. But that you don't need to know this. There's a couple of things here: harnessing collective intelligence. And here, I like this one a lot, leveraging the long tail through customer self-service. For businesses, this is one of the reasons why it's so important. So what is the long tail? The long tail is a term that was devised by Chris Anderson, editor of Wired magazine. He wrote a book in 2006 called The Long Tail. And the long tail fundamentally is this. Okay, everyone happy? Does everyone understand what it is now? Probably not. So what I'll do is explain. If you consider your traditional business models, they concentrate in this left-hand area, in the green area of the slide, on selling large numbers of very few products. So on the x-axis, you have the number of products. On the y-axis, you have the sales. So the green area shows you the number of products. On a traditional bookshop, for example, you would have maybe 10,000 book titles in stock. Now, the 10,000 book titles would be sold to an audience of maybe 5 miles, let's say 7, 10 kilometers around the bookshop. I often ask, what is the furthest that any of you have gone to buy a book? Not that you were on holiday and you bought a book, but you've specifically traveled to go and buy a book. So can anyone please just put into the chat system now, very quickly, the furthest distance in kilometers or miles, whatever works for you, that you have traveled to get a book? 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, good. If you live in the countryside, if you live in rural areas of your country, that might happen. I did this session once in Azerbaijan, and someone told me that he had traveled something like 140 kilometers, and he did the trip specifically to the capital to buy the book, because it was a very specialist book for what he was studying. I live in London, and so I don't think I've probably ever traveled more than 4 or 5 kilometers or 5 miles to buy a book. Now, of course, if this is your business and you have a limited number of 10,000 book titles, then you will sell those titles in the hundreds. That's why people concentrate on bestsellers. That's why the bestseller will sell even more, because it is going to be stocked by the bookshop. Every bookshop will have that particular title. And so when people are looking for things, they will always find it. Then along came someone like Amazon. In Amazon, we had 2 million book titles, I believe, last time I looked. 2 million book titles. So this line goes all the way off the screen on the right-hand side. 2 million book titles that you can buy. But they don't tend to sell thousands and thousands of each one, of course. You'll find some book titles are so rare, so obscure, that they're only of interest to 20 people in the world. Now, those 20 people obviously cannot travel across the world to London or to Seattle or to New York or to Paris to buy that particular book. This allows them to buy it. So you have 20, 10, 15, 5 people. But when you add up that yellow space in the curve of the long tail, all of those revenues, number of products times sales, all of those revenues far exceed that green section on the left-hand side. So this is what we talk about with the long tail. Now, I started in e-commerce. I told you my background was in music, and I started in e-commerce because I was a music expert, and I was recruited in Barcelona, where I lived at the time, to work in a startup selling. It was the first e-commerce music startup in Spain. We were the largest. We had the largest catalog in the world. We believe it. We know it was the largest catalog in Europe. We believe it was the largest in the world. We had 550,000 titles, 550,000 unique music titles. So, for example, Michael Jackson's Thriller is one title. And then, of course, you might have different formats: vinyl, CD, cassette, etc. We also then expanded into doing DVDs, video games, etc. But the music was the core area. Now, let me ask you, please, again, just write into the chat box who you believe was consistently, every month we would pull off our best-selling titles. Please tell me who you believe, which artist you believe was our best-selling title year after year after year, and month after month after month. ABBA, that's always popular, especially around Christmas time, but no, this was around, let me give you a period, 2000 to 2004. So this will make you think, for example, J-Lo. I'm not entirely sure J-Lo was around at that time. I think she was called still Jennifer Lopez, but no. Anyone else? Now, I should tell you also that our e-commerce site, we had 6 languages. We did Spanish as the main one. No, it was in Spain, but also we had Portuguese, Italian, French, German, and English. And of course, with those languages, we could do it globally. Robbie Williams was still quite young. Michael Jackson, he had just done one of his albums. Enrique Iglesias, of course, very popular in Spain, not necessarily very popular globally, though. It was the time of the Beatles album and their anthology, but I can tell you it wasn't the Beatles. No one else daring to go? Okay, so let me see. I'm not sure if I'm able to. Right, let me see. Then Celine Dion, Britney, but oh, Adriana, you're trying to go for everyone, aren't you? So Shakira had come out recently. Madonna was very popular, of course. Prodigy, Ralph, good idea, but still very, very niche. Rolling Stones, like the Beatles, they weren't doing anything new. Celine Dion at the time of Titanic, but that was kind of late 90s, wasn't it? So, is there anyone here from Argentina? Just quickly type a yes. No? Okay, so this, can you see what I'm writing here? I'm not very good at writing on a trackpad, I'm afraid. Very good, Adriana. Les Luthiers. Les Luthiers, the rest of you are saying. Who on earth are they? Les Luthiers, as you should know, really, are only the biggest and most popular um, troupe, comedy music troupe in Argentina. And I hear many of you saying, "Really? Who are they?" Well, they're very niche. I didn't know who they were until I realized that we were selling them, and we are the only people who sold them online. So we had sales from Argentina, of course. We had sales from all over Latin America. We had sales from Spain. But of course, there are people who like Les Luthiers. Maybe they were Argentinian or Argentinian background, or they just loved Argentinian comedy and music, buying them all over the world. We had sales in Australia, in Japan, in China, in Middle East. We had sales in Northern Europe, in the USA. Les Luthiers. But we didn't sell hundreds and hundreds every month. We sold maybe 20, 30 CDs and DVDs every month. But we had sales over 100,000 different product lines every month. And so if you only have 5 sales of one title, 20 sales, 30 sales of another, obviously this quickly adds up. This for me is all social technology as well, because this is the many talking to the many. This allows people to buy what they want. It gives them access to the products and services that they want, when they want them, anywhere they want them. And this was never possible before social technologies existed. This was never possible before the World Wide Web existed. So, Wikipedia. Some of you will have heard of Wikipedia. This is an example of a social technology. And they talk about a perceived second generation of web-based communities and hosted services such as social networking sites, wikis, and folksonomies, which aim to facilitate collaboration and sharing between users. For me, collaboration and sharing is very important. Not just because I have a small child and I'm trying to teach him to share and collaborate, but it's important for all of us. The wikis, we're going to talk about. Folksonomies, we're going to talk about. I'll get through all of this vocabulary, I promise. So when we look at Web 2.0, we have lots of vocabulary that people use. Some of it is very technical. AJAX, for example, FOAF, XHTML. You don't need to know these things. Some of it we've discussed. The long tail, folksonomy. We'll get onto those things. It embraces hundreds and hundreds of brands. I've done this session. I prepared to teach this session to some executive education providers, students in from China. And I went through, and of course, for every brand in the West that I was able to highlight, there was a brand in China. So for Twitter, we actually I've forgotten the brands now. We had Weibo, Sina Weibo. You have Ren, you have 51. There are all kinds of brands in China doing the same thing. Some of them, because of the nature of the Chinese market, much larger than the Western original. And a lot of your countries will have your own brands of social media. You might use Facebook, but you might find that you actually have your own social networks. We're going to talk about all this vocabulary. So it's not just about Facebook. Social media, social technologies in general are those that involve the crowd. They involve the great unwashed, as I like to call them, in one way or another. So first of all, we're looking at a mashup. Now, if you look at this, this will show this is the business school I work at, Huntington International Business School, and this is an example of a mashup. It combines cartographic data and a directory of businesses. When I was looking for an apartment back in the late 90s, when I was trying to find an apartment in Barcelona, I would go through the walk around the street, and I would see some pictures on the some posters on the wall saying in Spanish they would say an apartment for sale, this million pesetas, this number of square meters, and this street. And I would write all the details down, the phone number, go back, open up a big map, and try and find exactly where they all were, and work out, well, how close is it to the metro? How close is it to the shops? Is it in the nice street or is it in the ugly streets, etc.? And then someone had something so genius, such a great idea, that it's a shock that nobody thought of it before. And that is, they decided to combine a map with a directory. So, for example, if you go to a real estate website now and you look for a directory of apartments or houses for sale, you will always see them on a map as well. So, for example, one of the most expensive streets in the world is here. It's called Bishop's Avenue. As you can see at the top, it's £45 million for this 12-bedroom, 8 reception room, 10 bathrooms. Very nice. And then there's two down there, £30 million for an 8-bedroom, 5 reception room. Lovely. So if anybody has any spare cash, to relieve them of it, because I've always dreamed of some of these places. And of course, you have the map showing on this road where the houses are. It's very simple, very easy, and as I say, shocking that nobody considered it before. So let's move on to blogs. Can you please tell me now in the chat box if you have a current blog or lapsed blog? Current or lapsed? Lapsed means you no longer keep your blog. Current means you're still blogging. Very good. Sarah, if you could please let me know what yours is about, please. What's the subject matter? And I can't believe that there is no other participants on this call who don't have a blog or haven't had a blog. Okay. It's better. Yeah. So a lot of people have started them. A lot of people then left them. And no blog. No time for that. That's a very fair point. I don't have time for my blog, which you can now see here. Oops. So this is my blog, which I've not updated in, I think, 2 years, because I've just been so busy with the day job, writing my book, etc. And it's irritating because I have all these ideas, but I don't have time. You have one for student information, but also for work internally. Thank you, Sarah. That's a very good point, because a blog is not just about your hobby. For some people, it is. Some people just want to keep a blog about their travels. I find some students, when they come to my business school, they will be talking about what they do in when they're traveling, what they're visiting. Some people are keeping it about their studies, and it's almost like a diary. They keep it private to themselves, or they only allow them their family or friends to access it. Some people, of course, make it public. I decided long ago when I started my blog that it was going to be a business blog. It's about technology. And as you know, I am always talking about, is this the best thing since sliced bread? Hence, talking about gamification, for example, in 2011 in this blog post. Haven't kept up with it, and I feel bad because I talk about these things, I teach about these things, but I honestly haven't had time either. But I intend to continue now that my book is finally finished. This is a colleague, though, from from another business school I used to work at, Eve Poole. Now, she did her PhD research into capitalism and theology. Now, not many people apparently are interested in capitalism and theology, and she found that there's only 3 other people in the world who are researching this subject matter. So she started writing her blog, talking about her research, what she's found, the debates in her mind, the discussions she's trying to expand on. And this has helped her connect with the other people globally. So the other people doing this research, the other 3 people have connected to her. She's had people coming to see her speak at conferences, not because of the conference, not because of the subject matter of the conference, but because they wanted to talk to her about her blog. And this has helped her build her own personal brand. If you are a freelancer, if you are trying to become a thought leader in any subject matter, a blog obviously is going to be very important. If you have your own business, a blog is a great way to connect with your customers. If you are in thought leadership, Andrew McAfee from Harvard Business School came up with the term Enterprise 2.0, and he wrote a book about it in, I think, 2006, 2007, which is essentially the use of enterprise, of social media, of Web 2.0, of social technologies in the enterprise. But it's very much talking about knowledge management, knowledge sharing, and that's why I feel there's such a crossover with all these areas. But when Andrew or Professor McAfee posts a blog post, he has such a big brand that he will have 30, 40, or 50 people commenting on his blog post all the time, every time. And he has a great discussion going. So, of course, it keeps his brand alive. So it's very good from the selfish point of view. But it's also helping expand knowledge. It's also helping get his names out. Most business schools pay their professors to research and publish in big journals. And yet, I think most would admit privately that a lot of the research that's published in journals isn't only actually going to help business very much. It isn't going to help society very much. It's not going to help the practitioners integrate the new technology or the new ideas into the business. But a blog allows you to deal with things in a very quick manner. It allows you to start to have conversations, to publish. You don't even need to be peer reviewed. You don't need to try and make sure it's in a print newspaper, because a blog means that you can publish what you want, when you want, and reach a big audience. Your organization might have a blog. Johnson & Johnson have a blog, but it is a good example of a corporate blog. It is transparently written by the staff. It's not written by the corporate communications department. It's not written by a PR department or PR agency. It is the staff writing it. As they say, 128,000 people work at Johnson & Johnson. The blog is an opportunity for us to find a voice and start some conversations, give our perspective, and share some stories that often get lost in formal communications about the work we do and the things we value. This is a fine example of a good corporate blog. It's for the staff, written by the staff, for the staff, but of course, it's also good at helping engage prospective employees. It's also good to build the brand of the company amongst the customers, and they can see what kind of organization they're dealing with. Non-profit organizations, government organizations can also have blogs. You have the Cabinet Office in the United Kingdom has a blog. Number 10 has a blog. There's no reason that anyone can't have a blog. Twitter, microblogging. So for those of you who think you don't have time for a blog, let me ask you now in the chat box, please, if you have a Twitter account, and if so, why don't you just post so we can all follow each other? Post your Twitter handle, as I've done. At the end of this session, I show you my contact details, my Twitter details, etc. But post your Twitter handle, just so we can see how many people are on Twitter. If you wish to keep it private, just say that yes, you have a Twitter account. Not on Twitter, not posting, not Twitter. Nope. No time to post. Elvira, that's not true. There's always time to post on Twitter. Thank you, Chike. Excellent. So there's quite a few of you are on Twitter. Now, for me, oh, Adriana, you've had a Twitter account hacked. Okay, everybody, can I please remind you that for your password, this is not a good password. Okay, that's going to make people really, that's going to allow people to hack you very quickly and very easily. So try and find a combination of capital letters and numbers and exclamation marks and punctuation that are difficult for people to guess just by looking at your name. So for example, I can tell you that that is not my password either, just in case you start to think so. Now for Twitter, or other microblogging platforms, it's 140 characters because it came from the old SMS system for mobile phones. It didn't rely on the internet. It didn't rely on Wi-Fi or on smartphone communications. It was from the old systems of an SMS message, and people post them to each other. Now, of course, it's a big broadcasting platform, and you have people with 50 million followers, ridiculous numbers, absolutely ridiculous. And it's a good example of should we believe that someone with a large number of followers is, should we believe that a large number of followers is a sign of intelligence? I'll answer the question, no. Because the people who have the largest number of followers at the moment are people like Lady Gaga or Justin Bieber or whoever the latest pop phenomenon is. And I'm showing my age by not even knowing the latest ones. I think the only person who has close to who is in the top 10 is the President of the United States. But of course, Twitter is a publications platform. So it is something that you can publish very, very quickly. If you follow me on Twitter, you will see that I almost only ever publish about technology. This is my core area. So if I find new technology, I will post a link to it and I will make a point, I will comment on it, I might make a joke about it. Sorry, Adriana, if people are famous and naked, they get many followers. Well, true, but they might. May I suggest to everybody listening here that you don't get naked thinking that you're going to get a lot of Twitter followers. You might find that you get arrested. So much better if you think about your brand. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to follow? Are you trying to build a brand as somebody, or do you just want it to be personal? That's fine, but there's a huge potential of having a closed group within Twitter that you can use just to send messages to each other within your department. So you don't have to keep sending emails and people have to follow the email. You just post and people can see what the latest message is amongst the Twitter feed. This is mine, for example. Twitter, it's a publishing platform. So many organizations try to use Twitter as a marketing tool, which is fine, but they're missing a trick. You see, I think there's a better way to engage. You'll find I've got some examples here of organizations that are using Twitter to do market research. They're using it for new product development. They are they're using it to discuss issues related to the products. They I've got a few comments later on about how to incentivize, but I know pharmaceutical companies that have started following some different Twitter accounts because people are talking, for example, about cancer. They're a pharmaceutical company that deals with medication that helps cancer. They're not allowed to do marketing. So what they do is they try and see what are the issues, what do people care about, what are people feeling, how are people engaging when they are talking about these very sensitive, difficult subject matters. So I've had, for example, I've had students in my class with a speaker in the classroom, and I was sitting at the back of the class, and I noticed some of them were on social media. Now, this was a digital marketing and social media class, so I wasn't particularly bothered, but I went onto Facebook, I went onto Twitter to find out what they were doing. And sure enough, they weren't just looking up football, they weren't doing their shopping. They were promoting the speaker, they were quoting the speaker, they were helping build the brand of the speaker, the teacher, me, and the school, and themselves. They were proving themselves to be social media experts, which also helped when they went out into the business place. So it's not just for people who are into marketing, but if you're able to build that brand for yourself, for your organization, that's always going to help. Fail. There are some things you have to be aware of, not just taking your clothes off, as one of our colleagues said just now in the chat system. Kenneth Cole, the fashion brand. This is Kenneth Cole is the Twitter handle of Mr. Cole himself, and during the Arab Spring in February 2011 in Tahrir Square, the Kenneth Cole tweeted this. For those of you who may not be able to read it properly, I'll read it out. Millions are in uproar in #Cairo. Rumor is they heard our new spring collection is now available online at, and then a link to the sales that Kenneth Cole had. This was the president, the founder of the company. The tweet was up for 2 hours before it was removed and an apology issued, but people started calling to boycott the company. There were 8,000 followers of the Kenneth Cole Twitter at the time of the tweet. 2,535 users subscribed to the Twitter handle Kenneth Cole PR in the first 2 hours, which was set up by somebody else, and continued to post negative things about Cole, jokes, and falsehoods. And there was an 8.4% fall in Kenneth's share price the year following that tweet. Now, of course, not all of that is going to be down to one bad tweet, but it was an important part of their. It was an important brand failure. In June 2009, an intern was tweeting for Habitat to get sign-ups for their customer mailing list. This was at the time that there were protests in Tehran, in Iran, over the disputed election, and they were using the hashtag Musavi. Hashtags of trending topics were used by the intern, who understood hashtags, didn't really understand boundaries. And they did one, for example, on Kobe, one on AT&T as a hashtag, one on the hashtag True Blood, and all of the text. So those of you who don't use Twitter, just to be clear, when you use the hashtag, it's a folksonomy. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's also a very quick way of finding everybody who's talking about the subject. If you click on that hashtag Musavi, for example, then you see every conversation happening at this time about Musavi. So you might have thousands and thousands of people reading that storyline, and then they would suddenly have this: join the database for free to win £1,000 gift card. Habitat's a furniture shop in Britain. The intern was taken off the Twitter account. The keys were taken off them, and Habitat self-imposed silence for 3 months as a way of apologizing for such an appalling fail. This is, of course, both this one and in Cairo. These are occasions when people were dying in the protests. Chike said that Twitter has worked for the change going on in Nigeria today. Twitter in politics, and that's right, and it's still doing an amazing job. I have other slides which I've taken out of here to try and not make the slide deck too big, about how it became a huge issue in Burma as well, when Aung San Suu Kyi, who was under house arrest for 10 years, when she was released, when there were protests, the only information that could get out was by Twitter, because you were still able to use Twitter without using the internet. So they would block down the internet, but they didn't block down SMS messages. Another organization that to make a stupid mistake with Twitter, this was a Scott Bartoshevich, a social media manager at New Media Strategies, a social media agency for Chrysler Group, the car company in Detroit in the USA. This is in March 2011. He thought he was tweeting to his own followers, not 7,500 Chrysler followers. And this was Chrysler trying to improve Detroit's image through a big imported from Detroit campaign. After, of course, the big world crisis of 2008-2009, and when the Detroit car industry almost completely collapsed. This particular individual, Scott Bartoshevich, wrote, "I find it ironic that Detroit is known as the Motor City, and yet no one here knows how to drive." Because he was stuck in traffic, he was a bit irritated. He didn't realize he was posting on the Chrysler account rather than his own personal account. Chrysler, of course, posted an apology, and Bartoshevich lost his job at the company. Do be careful. This doesn't mean don't use Twitter. It just means be careful. McDonald's. In January 2012, they launched a sponsored hashtag campaign to get the public talking about the quality of ingredients and share pride the employees have. The campaign was pulled within an hour. There were something like 72,000 mentions of McD's. They wanted McD stories, hashtag McD stories, and they say only 2% were negative, but many of those negative ones were retweeted frequently. For example, Alice here had said, hospitalized for food poisoning after eating McDonald's in 1989. Never ate there again and became a vegetarian. Should have sued. So, again, doesn't mean you shouldn't embrace Twitter. But do remember that if you want to have a conversation on Twitter, the conversation will not be yours to manage. You will have people talking to you. They'll give you negative feedback. They'll give your organization negative feedback. And you have to learn to say, thank you for the feedback, rather than trying to shut them down. Try and think carefully. Are people going to hijack a particular campaign of yours to use it for their own purposes, or will it just be one or two people who you might be able to then engage? Contact them, say, Alice, look, so sorry to hear about this. When did this happen, etc., etc. You could have actually got in touch with this person. And of course, some people are never going to be satisfied, and maybe you have to deal with that. Here's just very quickly one Foreign Commonwealth Office in the UK. This is breaking news. So the FCO will tell you which countries they recommend you don't go to, for example, which ones you do go to, which ones you should avoid for various reasons, if there are protests happening, if there's a military coup, if you have an Ebola outbreak, etc. Renault in the UK, as an example, they use it simply doing marketing and PR, and that's fine. But be conscious who you're broadcasting to. So if you're talking about new cars, you're going to be broadcasting to mainly to journalists, car aficionados, and car salespeople. So you're not going to be engaging with the general public. Xerox have a huge range of Twitter handles, many of which they're not actually using for anything. But they use this one for free downloads and tips for office printing. Lloyds TSB, this is the commercial bank, and they use it as customer services. So people get in touch and they say, hey, please email us. When I came back from the conference where I met Habib and Ibrahim from ABMS, I was stuck. On the way to the conference, I had a stopover. I missed my connection and I had to stay over in Frankfurt. And on the way back, I had a stopover and I missed my connection. I had to stay in Vienna. And I started using Twitter to explain how angry I was with Austrian Airways. Austrian Airways got back to me on Twitter. Lufthansa did not. Austrian Airways got back to me and said, please email us. Let's see what we can do to help. And I did that, and I've not heard back from them. I can guarantee you one thing, though, I will not be using Lufthansa or Austrian Airways again because of the poor experience I had over that last weekend's travel. So this commercial bank uses it for customer services. Waitrose, British supermarket, uses it for customer services as well. But there's also a B2B use. Dell, the computer manufacturer, in 2009 they launched Dell Outlet, and this is to use it. This is to use Dell Outlet to sell end-of-line computer equipment to businesses. So this is only business to business that they started selling this end-of-line computer equipment at great discounts. Within 1 year, they had earned $2 million through Twitter. You were not able to purchase this equipment through any other website. It was only through the offers that you could find through the Dell Outlet Twitter handle, and they managed to get $2 million of revenues. So if you think about it carefully, there are always amazing ways to start engaging with people. As you can see, they have 1.43 million followers because those followers know that they can get some very, very good deals. So there are all kinds of business benefits for Twitter. Participating in industry conversation. Is there any kind of organization perhaps that should not have a Twitter feed? So I asked a class of students. These are MBA, EMBA students, master students, and they started saying, when I asked, well, actually, let me ask you. So, is there anybody in the chat room, please? Is there any type of organization that should not have a Twitter account, that it's just not appropriate? Any kind of organization at all? Silence. Okay, so I shall move on. Because I strongly believe that no, there is no. Sarah, can I repeat? I asked Sarah, is there any type of organization that should not have a Twitter account? Shurez says, I don't think so. All should have, just that need to be managed. Exactly. Sanya, really, the United Nations should not have a Twitter account? I think the United Nations should have a Twitter account because they have so many messages they need to deliver, and most people are not going to get those messages. It might be about fundraising, it might be about new resolutions, it might be about new campaigns to help people in particular areas as part of the WHO or other, or UNESCO, etc. Alex says terrorists. Now, morally, a terrorist should not have a Twitter account. I agree, morally. But if I were a terrorist, I absolutely believe that it's the best way to reach, to breed terror and to reach potential recruits, which unfortunately is what is happening with the organization Islamic State. So times I've asked this question, people would tell me, a funeral parlor should not have a Twitter account. I mean, who's going to want marketing from a funeral parlor? Oh, there we are, Jules. Thank you. Working for the UN Agency for Refugees and using Twitter, and it makes a huge difference. That's excellent. That's excellent to know. And I've seen lots of case studies of how using Twitter in relief efforts when there's been a disaster, earthquakes, etc., has been very useful for people sharing information and getting also the locals to say, we need food in this area, or we need water in this area, or tents or blankets, etc., because they don't have an individual email address that they can say, oh, could we please have a delivery? So, talking about funeral parlors, we have the Bowie Funeral Home, or the Miller Funeral Home, or the Austin's Funeral Home. These are just some random ones that I quickly, Sussex Funeral Services, these are ones that I quickly found. And then we also have hospices. A hospice, for those of you who are not native English speakers, is where people who are terminally ill go to spend their last few days before they unfortunately pass away. And yet even these hospices will use them. This is a children's hospice. As a father of a young child, I can't think of anything worse than losing a child to a terminal illness. But what they're doing, and this is another one, and this is another one, what they're doing is they are using their tweets for fundraising efforts. So the lesson here is to know your audience. Think about what your community to talk about. It might be tweeting updates to your extended faculty network. It might be for talking to fundraisers. It might be talking to your customers, to your supply chain. It might be engaging with people who do the same function as you in the same department, but on the other side of the world. So in my business school, for example, we have 5 campuses. So it's a useful way for some people to use microblogging to communicate very quickly different plans, actions, innovations that they've been working on. Rachel also working for UK Aid and using Twitter a lot to reach our partners. I am delighted to hear that. Thank you. Right, it's now 11:05. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to skip a little through social networks because this is what a lot of people do. They understand the social network. So, first of all, let me just one moment. So we all know, of course, that social networks, we know that we're talking about Facebook, and every organization now seems to have a Facebook account. They have ways of engaging with the huge audience on Facebook, getting people to talk about their brand, and you can give them an incentive. If you like our page, as Amazon did, if you like our page, you get a voucher. First Direct, an online bank in the UK with the reputation for the best customer services, has used it for new product development. They've also used it for customer feedback, and they say, well, look, contact us by email so that we're not exchanging information about accounts, but it's a very good way. I've spoken in conferences where I've seen people speak and say, you should always be transparent. You should only have one account on Facebook, and that should be you. And I disagree entirely. I have different people. I am different people. The person I am speaking to you now, as a professor of technology and marketing, with a background in digital marketing, social media, e-commerce, online learning. I am not the same person I am as when I am with my son and I'm in the park. So I don't talk to him about digital marketing, social media, information technology, social technologies. And I don't talk to you very much. I did a little bit today. I don't talk to you very much about Lego or about the Octonauts and so on. So this is my professional Facebook account. You're welcome to befriend me on Facebook with this account or subscribe to my updates if you don't want to befriend me. This is my personal account. This is just for going to the park. This is just photos of my son when we go to places. And it's only for friends and relatives. So there is nobody who is not a relative actually connected to me there. A lot of companies have used Facebook, though, for important business critical issues. So, for example, Tata Steel use it in the recruitment process. There is I think Ernst & Young use it for recruitment, Accenture use it. And I had a very good case study, I can't remember the brand right now, of an Indian company, an Indian consulting firm, IT firm, that was recruiting for its digital, it's recruiting for, for its graduate placements, graduate roles. And it had 50 roles available and it had 1,000 applicants. So what they did was and this was back in about 2009, they asked everybody to go onto Facebook and to become part of a group on Facebook, which was the, let's call it the Ronan brand recruitment group. What people did is they started to communicate with each other in this group. They would say, hey, I got through the selection process. I got my first interview. Has anyone had their first interview? And someone else would post, yeah, I had the interview. They asked me about this and this and this. And they might ask you some difficult questions. And then people say, hey, I got through that. Now I'm going through to the selection weekend. Is anyone going? Maybe we can hook up. Some people used to meet offline for coffee in their local town if they found that they were living in the same area. The result is that for the first time ever in this recruitment process, the company managed, when they finally decided on the 50 people they wanted to offer the jobs to, all 50 accepted the offer, all 50 turned up on day one, and all 50 were still there 3 months later. What usually happened was they would offer the jobs to people, but some of them would have found other jobs or decide they didn't want it. Some of them may find other jobs before they got to the actual date, the start date, or some of them found that they felt so lonely and abandoned, sometimes having to move to a different city when they started the job, that they were not able to continue. But by creating this community, making sure that people were engaging with each other on Facebook before they ever got to even be a part of the company, meant that they suddenly had a community of new entrants. 50 new graduates all knew each other. They all had a social experience of each other. They were in a community already. They were not going to let down that community. And it saved, of course, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for the company in recruitment, not having to suddenly go back and start recruiting when people left. LinkedIn, I suspect, I hope you are all on LinkedIn. If you're in Germany, you might be on Xing, Xing. There are a few other professional networks, but if you want to find a job, I can't think of any better one than LinkedIn. It's also a great way to network, of course. When I want to find somebody in a company, I find that now I've contacts, and I only ever connect to people who I have personally had contact with. But of course I forget. But at least I don't have to go start looking through my filing cabinet of 1,000 business cards that I have picked up at conferences over the years. Now, some people do then say, I'm too old for this. And for those people, I quote one of my favorite authors, Douglas Adams, who wrote the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He was a great technophile. He loved technology. And what he used to say is, anything that is in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary, and that's just a natural part of the way the world works. So, for example, I'm of an age. I was a child in the 70s, so we had TV. That was normal. We had landline telephones, and yeah, I talked to friends on the phone. Um, we got a VHS video recorder in the late 70s, and I was able to take it out of the box, plug it in, switch it on, set the timer without looking at the manual. And my parents, with the manual, with my instructions over many, many, many years, were never able to set the timer up properly. It was just natural for me. It was the way the world worked. Then Douglas said, anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. So the World Wide Web was created when I was in my early 20s or mid 20s, and I thought, that's interesting. I could get a career in this, and I managed to do so. And anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things, and it's very, very true. Goodbye, Robert. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your advanced finance, and I hope you have a lovely time. So what Douglas Adams said, I find very true. When I talk to friends of mine, all of us are over 35 now, and they do not work in technology. And I talk about technology, and they say, "Oh, it's not for me. I'm not interested in doing that." And it's something that I just try and remind people: you're not doing it because you're old. It doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you won't have a good, valuable option to use it. Goodbye, Chiki. So most people on social networks are in the 35 to 44 age period. These are the ideal, these are high earning people in offices. This is a perfect target audiences. Most of the people in your organization are in social networks as well. Goodbye, Sarah. Goodbye, Chike. Technology owes ecology and apology. True. Yes, because technology is everything. Technology is down to the wheel. If we didn't have the wheel, Chike, the wheel would not allow us to have transport. If we didn't have the transport, we would not have been able to move. We would not have been able to create a farming society as opposed to being hunter-gatherers. If we weren't able to farm, we wouldn't have excess crops. If we didn't have excess crops, we wouldn't be able to create a society where we have hierarchies of priests and leaders and workers and army and people doing all this. But equally, it's due to technology that we also have art, and we also have healthcare, and we also have everything else. So technology is everything. Wikis. We've already talked about wikis a little bit. As you all know, Wikipedia is an example of a wiki. A wiki is a website that anyone can access and edit. Now, you can limit it to just your organization, your department, but you can make it much wider. Of course, for a larger audience, you can make it open to the entire public, such as Wiktionary. So if you go to wiktionary.org, you'll see that the origins of the word wiki come from the Hawaiian wiki, which means quick, and the English word web, which means web. You can also move down. You can see that in Swahili, the word wiki also means week. Now, the idea of a wiki, something that everyone can edit, everyone can access, is nothing new. We've had chalkboards available or notice boards for hundreds of thousands of years. Different ways for different people to post messages, to change other people's messages. But of course, this just makes it available to a wider audience. A lot of people believe that Wikipedia is unreliable. Now, a Wikipedia, if you're doing any academic work, you should not be using Wikipedia as a point of reference, but it's a good place to start. Like any encyclopedia, like Encyclopedia Britannica, it's a good place to start your research. You can start thinking, well, what is this about Wiki? Or what is it about the Tahrir Square protests? So there was a study in Nature magazine in 2005, and they compared Encyclopedia Britannica to Wikipedia, and they looked at 42 articles. They compared the accuracy through peer review, and they discovered that, sure enough, there were fewer errors per article in Encyclopedia Britannica compared to Wikipedia, 3.9. However, in Wikipedia, there were 4 articles of 42 completely free of error, but there were none in Encyclopedia Britannica. And importantly, of course, the very day after this publication by Nature magazine and the journal, the very day after it was published, Wikipedia's errors had all been corrected, whereas Encyclopedia Britannica had to wait until the next option. Wikipedia is full of spam. Actually, it's less so now, because it has been moderated. There is a hierarchy of moderation just to make sure that that doesn't get through. So there is some nonsense there, but the advantage of everybody working on it at the same time, it means that in fact the truth is usually there, and there is no reason, as was proved by Nature, that a printed publication will not have inaccuracies. Wikiversity, you can of course get all your learning materials for business education for an MBA on Wikiversity Business School. You can learn all about Web 2.0. And indeed, I've often thought, why do we often sit in classrooms when we're learning when we could do things such as this? So I have run several of these virtual sessions in the past, and there's still an issue, of course, of interaction. It's still not ideal, but we are able to have some kind of interaction, which is good. And I think in the future, the technology will help us do that much more naturally. MOOCs, much of this idea of this interaction is still captured in the wonderful world of MOOCs, but there's of course a lot of the MOOCs are simply one-sided. You simply follow the video, you go through the online text, you engage with people, but it's not a truly interactive experience. So again, I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to quickly move on. Online collaboration and sharing. Now, this fundamentally is all about crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is it's crowdsourcing for me is admitting that you do not have the best people in your organization for a particular problem. You might have great people, and in general, they're great for most problems, but they're not great. They're not the perfect person for every problem. So this was identified by Don Tapscott and Anthony Williams in their book Wikinomics several years ago now, and they identified the Gold Coal Mining Corporation that offered $575,000 in prize money to anyone in the world who could successfully identify where undiscovered gold might lie. Retired geologists, graduate students, military officers around the world chipped in. They recommended 110 targets, half of which Gold Core had not previously identified. 4/5 of them turned out to contain gold, and the company's value has rocketed from $100 million to $9 billion. Just by saying, we don't have the best people in our organization, can you help us? IBM did a study a few years ago called The Power of Many, and they talked about Eli Lilly, who had a big problem that their big cash cow, Prozac, was running out of its patent period, and so Eli Lilly were concerned about their big revenues. So they launched Research Without Walls in the mid-90s to create a network of external researchers in biotech, academia, and so forth. Anyone can now go to Innocentive, post a problem, and see if someone can solve it. Nature teamed up Innocentive to help find more solvers. Procter & Gamble have done this through their Connect and Develop program, inviting outside developers with promising product, technology, business model, method, trademark, package, or design ideas to submit them for a chance to strike the next game-changing deal with a corporation. Kraft Foods have also done this. General Mills, one of the world's largest food manufacturers, has requested ideas for innovation from users and customers. So if these enormous organizations are able to ask others, what ideas do you have? Then any organization can. But it's odd, it's that for some reason it is often the large organizations who are prepared to expose themselves to outside influences. Smaller organizations, where there's less bureaucracy, are often more frightened of doing this, and they shouldn't be. Excuse me. Crowdfunding. So we have crowdfunding. There's of course a lot of ways of earning, of getting money for your entrepreneurial idea, be it a new technology, it could be a new, it could be some fundraising for charity, it could be for some kind of arts or media, but there are lots of platforms available to do this now, and you can even crowdfund an entire enterprise through asking the general public. You don't have to go to venture capitalists, and you don't have to just go to the market. Folksonomies. So what do we do when there's too much information? How do we find anything? So a folksonomy is the categorization by users of all kinds of content. A taxonomy can benefit from folksonomies by getting users, employees, customers, students to tag articles, books, reports, presentations, products, and services. So, for example, this is a traditional taxonomy where things are stacked. It's a hierarchy. And now, if you consider the library, imagine you go into a library where you have old-fashioned books and you were trying to find my book, which is coming out in August, on social technologies. So you might decide, okay, I need to go to the section on books, and then I have to decide, do I go to business, fiction, or reference? Well, under business, we might have marketing, operations, strategy, information technology. Under reference, we have education. Under information technology, we then have knowledge management, outsourcing, computing. And under marketing, we have social media segmentation. And of course, under knowledge management and computing, there's also social media. And then you have my book. Now, if you're looking on a physical shelf, where do you put the book? The beautiful thing with taxonomies, excuse me, this is a taxonomy. The beautiful thing with folksonomies is that all you would need to do is label the book with social media, and then you would find it no matter where it sits, under computing, under knowledge management, under marketing. And with websites, of course, this is what we are able to do. Those websites could be internal intranets, online platforms, etc. So there are lots of places to get the tags. Now, I'm conscious that time is fleeting, so I'm going to really go ahead quite quickly. Podcasts, I hope you are all engaged with podcasts. If you are not, then I suggest, there are many good ones, and This Week in Google is one of the best that I find in keeping up to date with technology. Widgets could be movable areas of your screen, but they also can be apps. So here's the question. Does your organization have a need for an app? Why is an app a social technology? There are several reasons. For me, the biggest issue is that anyone can create an app. You no longer require Microsoft or Apple to create the software, or Adobe to create the software that you can use to do something. Lots of people are now able to create apps to do one small little thing on your phone or on your desktop. And that might be all you need to monitor your supply chain, for example, to not have to get a report every month, but you can get an updated itemized indication of your sales at any moment, for example. Virtual worlds. So we're coming towards the end now. I will try and fit it all in 5 minutes, but it's going to be a push, I'm afraid. So if you're able to just hang on a few minutes, just in case we go over, that'd be great. But I know there's another session starting at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock Swiss time. Now, virtual worlds. There are lots of brands in the virtual world space as well. If you look at 2008, you have lots of accounts. These is from a consulting firm called K0, and these are split by age. If we suddenly go forward to 2014, look how many virtual worlds are now available. Let's look closer. Here, at the average age of about 37, is Second Life with 41 million regular users. That's pretty good. 41 million regular users. However, if you look at this age group, 15 to 25, you have 120 million users of Imvu, average age of just over 15, 140 million on MapleStory. 140 million regular users, just over 15 years of age. Let's go down a bit, age 10 to 15. We suddenly see 310 million users on Stardoll, average age just below 15. Just over 13 with 110 million users on Minecraft. 295 million people in Habbo with an average age of 14. Then 182 million on Movie Star Planet, 11.5 average age, and just over 10 years old, 313 million in Pop Tropica. Finally, look at this. From 5 to 10 years of age, you have 75 million 9-year-olds on Neopets, 22 million 7-year-olds on Jumpstart. But look at that, 225 million with an average age of about just below 10 years old on Club Penguin. So all these young people from 5 to 15 will be joining education in 5 to 10 years. Master's education, 10 to 15 years. They are going to be your customers. They might already be your customers, depending on your business, but they will be coming through. They will be your workers. They will be your customers. They will be your suppliers. They will expect virtual worlds. They will be comfortable with them. They will consider them in the same way that we think of the TV, the phone, the video or DVD recorder, the laptop. They are going to be comfortable dealing in 3 dimensions and interacting in that space. They will have an Oculus Rift or a very similar headset. They'll be happy moving within this space. So we won't have to have this conference, for example, this webinar now, with this 2-dimensional slide, because they will be interacting in that 3-dimensional space. There are terrorists in Second Life, there are conferences in Second Life, business uses. There's been education in Second Life. And there's a whole thing of identity. So when I started exploring Second Life, because that was the main one for my age group, for business uses, for professionals, when I was working at another business school at Ashridge, this is what we built a space and we started to make it look like that. As you can see, it wasn't too bad. We got someone who knows what they're doing to build it. We even got a squirrel. And I was maneuvering. Now, one thing I noticed is that there were a lot of people in Second Life who made themselves look beautiful, absolutely gorgeous avatars in Second Life. Men were always 26 years of age and muscular and fit, and women, for some reason, always wanted this stereotypical hourglass figure of a large chest, very narrow waist, very long hair. And I didn't want people to see me in Second Life and then see me in real life and say, "Oh, my word, what happened to you?" So I decided to go the other way. I tried to make my avatar as ugly as possible. I put everything up to the absolute limit so that when people saw me in real life, they wouldn't actually be disappointed, but they might think there's an improvement. So this is what I look like. Now, I tried to go for something which is a constant reminder that I needed to lose weight. So I tried to make it as fat as possible. So, yep, I need to lose weight. And then I realized, well, I'm actually representing my business school and I'm using this and I'm meeting researchers. So maybe I should dress him a bit better. And I tried to find a black suit to put on him, but I didn't see a suit. So I pressed a button that said black suit, but actually what it said was black man in suit. So that's interesting. It's exactly the same avatar, same physiognomy, same head, same chin, everything, but it's black. And I said, you know what, I'm going to leave it, because I found suddenly people were treating me differently. And this is a very interesting space to start exploring what it's like, doing role plays. What it's like to be different people from different races, religions, cultures. You don't know in a virtual world if someone's in a wheelchair. 20% of female avatars in Second Life are in fact men. So there are some people who are using for education, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some organizations like the British National Health Service have been using it to try and find the ideal hospital, using it for scenario planning, what happens in organizations, what happens with stress. And there's been a lot of research already on how to use Second Life, how to use virtual worlds in general. And it's something I urge now. It's not ready yet. It's not for your business yet, but it will be soon. So to sum up, these are all the different things that I think organizations can use for social technologies. Okay, knowledge management, sharing, engaging with customers, employees, suppliers, new product development, customer research, collaboration, optimization. And the big question then is how to do it. Here's very quickly the framework. First of all, very obvious, strategize. You have to come up with a strategy. Why do you want to use virtual world? Why do you want to use social technologies? Are you creating community engagement? Are you trying to do knowledge sharing, knowledge management, project management? Are you trying to do new product development? Are you trying to get customer research, customer feedback? Find out what you want to do. Is it internal or external or both? You then need to incentivize. So one pharmaceutical organization, as I mentioned before, started to incentivize their salespeople to engage with the communities on that illness. And it was built into the performance appraisal. If you build it into the performance appraisal, then people will start doing it because their job depends on it, their bonus depends on it. It might be that you pay money for the number of relevant posts, or you reward people who get likes on your knowledge management system. If you have your chief executive using the Twitter feed and watching, and you want to get noticed, then people will start using it because they want to get noticed by the chief executive. Gamification, maybe you can have a leaderboard. You can have people who posted the most relevant articles, who have got the best scores from their peers. You then need to trust people. Excuse me. Yes, there's another lecture starting now. Goodbye, Irina. I'll be finishing in a second. Thank you. For those who have to leave quickly, I'm just finishing off now in about 3 minutes. So, employees like having a job. A lot of people don't want social technologies in the workplace. They don't want Facebook because their employees are not going to work. And a friend of mine, who's now the chief operating officer of one of the world's largest publishing firms, told me that every time when he was chief information officer, people would come to him and say, "Look, can we block Facebook, please? Because on our internal networks, because I find my staff are using Facebook too much." And he would refuse to do it. He said, "No, I'm not going to block it because if you have your staff using Facebook, that is not a technology issue. That is a performance management issue. And you, as a manager, have to manage your team. So you have to trust them as well." Employees, once they're given guidelines, they don't usually shoot themselves in the foot. They will not deliberately get themselves out of a job if you explain to them what they can post about and you cannot post. If someone gives you feedback, be it an employee or a customer, you don't block the customer. You don't try and shut them down. You say, "Thank you for the feedback. How can I help you? What happened? What was the situation? Maybe we can resolve whatever it was." Trust people to do the right thing. Most of them will. And the trolls that exist in the world can be ignored. Champions, you do need a champion. You need someone to lead in each department to make sure that they implement correctly. And you need two attributes. The champion must already have embraced social technologies and require no further encouragement or incentives to do so. And they also must be mavens. They must know people in the department. You can't get the person in the department who nobody has heard of. They won't be able to encourage anyone. You need to get people who are popular, who know everyone within the department or the organization or the division, but they also have to have personal interest in taking in using the technologies. You have to engage. This is the center of the framework because you must focus on any social technology. If the organization implements social technologies, but the employees do not engage with them, the exercise has been a waste of time. If the champions drive the usage of the social technologies, but their colleagues engage drops off after the initial training, the exercise has been a waste of time. The problem, therefore, is how to ensure there is momentum behind using the technology and how the organization and individuals can be sure that they won't allow themselves to slowly drop the social technology engagement as more immediate and more pressing issues arise. So you need to constantly engage. You can't create a blog and then not post. You can't create Twitter feed and not post. And review. You need to measure success. You must define success. You need to build it. You can't build it and leave it and forget about it. So technologies are not just for IS&T. I think social technologies, should be removed from control of the IS or the information technology department because they are for everyone. They're not just for everyone to use, but for everyone to consider using. So managers, leaders, directors have to think how these technologies can benefit their own work practices. Social technologies are the future because they are not set in stone and they will constantly change. They don't rely on wires and hard drives or on SSD cards. They don't rely on wearable computing or Wi-Fi or even the internet. Social technologies could be tools that are useful within a specific unit within the organization, or they could engage the entire planet. Social technologies are by their nature for everyone to use, but some will be close to a subset or a small group, but for everyone to appraise. And if you as a manager or a leader are not aware of what those tools are, you have no opportunity to explore their potential use within the organization. Worse, if you assume that new technologies are for kids or for techies or are irrelevant to your organization, you're either doomed to fail in the long term or to eat humble pie. So this is the framework that came out of all my research. Sitka: strategize, incentivize, trust, champion, engage, and review. If you don't do it, then you have to worry about your survival because you're likely to go the same way as the dodo. Finally, little gentle plug. In August 2015, my book is coming out from the publishers Paul Grave Macmillan. This is a few minutes over time. I apologize very, very sincerely. Please, do you have any questions? No questions? No questions? Okay, excellent. The book is Making Social Technologies Work, Leveraging the Power and Managing Perils of Social Technologies in Business. I will be quite frank, this was the title that the publishers wanted. I wanted something a little more catchy, but they wanted a job that said what the book did. So there you have it. Thank you very much, Alec. Okay, so I will, let me just quickly see if I can go back to the main page because I'm currently on my slides. So I believe now that we are at an end. And so you can see me once more. So thank you very much. I believe this is all we need. And Dr. Habib, thank you all very much. You have my contact information. I will arrange with Dr. Habib and Ibrahim how to upload the slides, because as you've seen, there are quite a lot, and they were too large to upload through the system normally, so I'm not sure how we're going to do that. I look forward to meeting you all in a virtual world one day. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Ronan. I hope you can hear me now.
I can.
I hope it was something good experience with us. Mr. Ronan will probably, you will see him more and more in the near future. I hope he will have more time for ABMS students. I really appreciate it. The class for today was really interesting, and I saw many students were really active, which is not easy to have during the virtual world. Thank you very much. Thanks to all students, and we will upload the class and the. I hope if you, I'm not sure if you have. Can you please send me around the presentation, because you were showing them. Yes, and then we'll upload the presentation as well. And for students who didn't attend the class, you can have it on our library. Thank you very much, and wish you a great day.
One thing I see there is Mohammed has a question. So finally, one question quickly. Nope. Okay, Mohammed, sorry.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll upload the slides. I'll pass them through and you can upload them to the library.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.